In this episode, we're talking about community and a lot of interesting things about emotional intelligence, leadership, and so much more. Take a step with us on the perfect route. Welcome to the program, viewers and listeners out there in internet podcast land. I'm pleased to have Julia Hage with me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Julia?
Sure. I'm Julia Hage, CEO and president of the Hage Co, a professional speaking and engagement firm. And the company was built on the ideology of cultivating engaging and enlivened experiences for all connections. And so a lot of it is connections out into the community when we do professional keynotes and different collaborative presentations, as well as coaching and advising for better alignment and authenticity, not just personally, but also professionally.
Great. It sounds like very fulfilling work.
It very much is. As I've gone through my career, I have purposefully decided what and who I give energy to ensure that what I am really filling my life with not only brings joy and fills the pocketbook, but also positively impacts those that I get to work with. So it's very, very passion filled.
How did you get into this?
It's been a journey. I'm not going to lie to you. It's been a journey of ups and downs and trying to discover myself along the way. Originally, I wanted to be a dentist. And I went to get a biology degree to achieve that goal, and then shifted my mindset on how could I make a broader impact. And so I ended up continuing on getting a master's in public health, which landed me in a health company business development team. And pretty rapidly, I realized not only do I enjoy business, but maybe I'm naturally good at it. And so as I started leaning into business development, B2B work, direct to consumer work, as well as learning more about the business lines, I started to recognize that I had some curiosities that I wanted to feed that hunger. And so I ended up in the business development world and then shifted over to the strategic planning world. And immediately I went, this naturally is making sense to me. And when you've ever had struggles going, why it's not clicking, why aren't things clicking, and then immediately stuff starts to click naturally, you start to lean into that and go, I want to know more. And then I had the opportunity to shift into a nonprofit sector where actually I had the chance to build a department within a business. And so building a development department felt like building a business in a business, to where you're doing financials, you're doing community engagement, you're building a brand from the ground up. And once I started to realize that that's what I was doing, it wasn't just matching the needs with the mission, matching the needs of what the organization was looking to attain, but also matching the mission. I started to recognize that there were some true business acumen I was gaining, and it was matching my passion and my purpose. And so to actually take that experience and pause and go, what could I do next with this experience? And pretty rapidly, I realized that it was build my own company and then start to understand, what do I enjoy the most? Who am I? And what do I want to contribute to this world? And what does that look like when it comes to the mission of my own company? And so that's where we've landed on a professional speaking and engagement firm.
Awesome. Quite the journey. And your perspective on all of this has changed a lot over time, I'm sure.
Very much. Very much. When you originally think that you are going to be a health provider in a clinical space, to going to, I want to positively impact as many people in the world as possible through, talking about alignment and authenticity, those are two very different things. And I feel like along the way, as you grow into an adult, right, as you grow into experience in a professional setting, you get to know more about who you are. And I think we all have an opportunity to lean into that. There are folks who maybe fight against that. No, I said I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. I said I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a teacher. And when we actually pause and go, who do I want to be versus who do folks want me to be? Or, what are the external pressures? Or I said I was going to be a dentist, so I should probably go be a dentist. We have an opportunity to take pauses and readjust based on who we're becoming. And once we start to do that, we get to live a more authentic and aligned life, which is so much fun.
Yes. And that alignment's always fascinated me because so many people don't think about it.
It almost is a second nature thing, which as I've been doing more work with the community, talking about alignment and authenticity, especially with leadership and business, we sort of forget that we should pause and go, does that business partnership actually match where we're trying to go with our mission? It doesn't. So why would we invest hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars, whatever it might be, in a partnership that might be based on, egos or based on expectations from the community. So it is interesting when we forget that not only do we have free will to go, wait a second, pause, let's lean into our humanity and say, does this make sense? Let's look at some data. But yeah, we forget that alignment is a really big part of intelligent decision making that's based on discernment versus based on emotion. Emotion plays a part, but the discernment and connection to our instincts is a really critical part to being an effective leader and business owner and coach and all these other wonderful things.
Can you think of something that, like a recent initiative or some other business event that really captures what you're thinking of?
There was an example of an outside organization coming into Toledo to partner with a local Toledo organization. It was a pretty high profile commitment, pretty high profile connection. Everything was looking really good. And also, it felt like a slight extension of the mission versus a true alignment with the mission. And I think that that's something that not only our business is working to do to diversify what they're giving time and energy to stabilize a financial balance sheet and or build new revenue streams. But sometimes that can get messy when we are walking away from a mission or taking a side step from the mission to actually to build something in a community that isn't connected directly to the mission. So say if we're looking at healthcare, if healthcare is focused on the care of a patient, that's wonderful. If they start to diversify to serve a community in a different way, that's okay if it still connects back to the mission. We have the potential to get into a little bit of a sticky spot if we start partnering with initiatives that are such a sidestep to the mission that we're actually losing the true servitude to the community. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a moment of pivot that a lot of local nonprofits and for-profits are in, to where they want to diversify to sustain their balance sheet in the ever-changing world. But if they start taking on partnerships that are misaligned with the long-term goals and mission, it might help the financials, but it might not be the right step. And so I think what I have seen from a business standpoint is typically those partnerships, they might dive into them, but they might not be long lasting, and or they might actually hinder the long-term buy-in to the mission. And so there's a lot of folks that are stripping back a lot of those extraneous partnerships to try to get back to the mission because they lost their original audience. They lost trust. There's now mistrust. There's a lot of mistrust in our world right now. And so when you tentatively lose trust with your main audience, that hurts the brand. It hurts hurts the brand, which then in turn hurts the cash flow but it has the potential to hurt the reputation as well. If you build yourself as a community facing organization, even a nonprofit, and then you start, if there's a lack of transparency or lack of communication, or folks are even curious about where their money is going if they're donating, that's a pause. You need to pause with that and realign and go, if I was donating, what would I want to see? Oh, I would want to know where my money is going. If I am a patient of a healthcare organization, I would want to know what's happening to the care of our community. Even if I'm a client of a bank, I want to know where my money is going. I want to know that my money is safe within a bank. And so I think we have this moment to pause and look at business on the whole, whether you're a small business like we are, or you're a larger multi-million or multi-billion business. You have an opportunity to lean into authenticity and alignment, because anyone who is being served by your organization is going to feel better. And that's where the emotion comes in. They're going to feel better, which means that they're going to trust and want to be a part of your organization on a bigger scale.
Thanks for going into such a nice level of detail on all of that too, because as a management professor, one of the things that I love to talk about is that alignment between strategy and community.
Oh yeah, it's so prevalent, and folks sort of forget about it. They go, oh, business is business and community is community. Even if you look at the nonprofit sector, nonprofits are nonprofits, for-profits are for-profits. And actually and this is one of my most favorite things to talk about, there's such a human aspect to all of this that when we work together, we can lift each other up, right? In Toledo, Ohio, we have, I think we're rounding 4,500 nonprofits. That's a lot of nonprofits. And
Mhm.
so when we think about what businesses can support the nonprofits and even how nonprofits can support the nonprofits, there is so much, strategically speaking, that can be done if we work better together. And truly, it comes down to, when do the egos play the role as the forefront in the conversation versus when does authenticity, alignment, transparency, what those human instincts, when do those actually take the forefront of the conversation? And what I have seen in my decade of experiences, when we can recognize we have more similarities than we do differences, we
Mhm.
have more alignment in our missions. It doesn't matter what level of leadership, what level, if it's a nonprofit versus a for profit, there is more alignment in our missions than we even realize. And it comes down to strategic initiatives and focus areas to bring a community together to move ahead together. And so it's funny when we talk about leadership development or business development, or even, oh, well, I heard a new nonprofit is starting, and it's like, there's so much that could be done together. We just have to recognize that if you win, then I win, and then we
Mhm.
win,
Yeah.
versus, well, there's another consultant on the scene. Oh man, Julia's doing consulting and Bill's doing consulting and we got Stacy doing consulting. It's okay, because we can lean on each other and go, actually, I'm not the right consultant. Have you met Bill? And once we lean into that, there's this beautiful like flow in our community that actually moves us all up in a wave together. It's a really beautiful thing. We just have to lean into it.
And not only the win-win pieces of what you're talking about with alignment, but just the fact that we're building this network of people and organizations that help strengthen
Mhm.
and reinforce each other is fascinating.
Yeah, and I I feel like network is underrated, and there's this famous saying that your net worth is your network, or your network is your net worth. And what I have learned, especially in growing a business, and this was something that if I were to do it all again, I would do slightly differently. Asking for help and leaning into your network is a really scary thing, because you don't want to take advantage. It's a fine balance, but knowing a lot of the right people does move you ahead. Not in a way of calling everyone and their brother and asking for something, but leaning into the fact that people have knowledge and they want to share it. Like truly, truly. And I don't know if you felt this as you've been building your company, but originally I siloed myself and I was like, I got to figure this out by myself. There
Mhm.
is so much knowledge out there. And if you lean into a network of wonderful humans, and that is a blessing of our beautiful region of Northwest Ohio, because people do want to see you win. And so if you lean into the curiosities of, how did that person get from there to there? I'm very curious about that. I want to learn more. When you start to be curious and just want to learn, people not only are going to share insights with you, but they become cheerleaders for you. And then you don't even end up asking for something. They end up calling you and going, hey, I just recommended you to X, Y, and Z. They're going to be following up with you. What a beautiful thing. And so
Mhm.
I think when we have the opportunity to be strategic in our partnerships, there's then an opportunity for you to show up better for others, and then them to show up better for you. And it really is the win-win mentality, but it's also the fine balance of, don't just start calling people and asking for everything, because it's going to burn out your people really, really quick. If you need something, yes, obviously. And just be curious about the people and build the relationships. It comes back to that trust as well. Not only do you need trust in the audience that you're working to be, the buyers to invest in your community or invest in your organization or buy into your coaching or, buy your book, whatever it might be. But it's actually the people that you build trust with, that they are not only going to be your long-term supporters, they are actually going to be the ones who naturally drive revenue into your company. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, good. That's something that I think we don't always put in the forefront. And it really should be, no matter what area of, business you're in. If you can lean into the network and the authenticity of building relationships and building the trust there, you naturally gain a wealth of knowledge that otherwise you may have missed out on.
Very good point. And it, again, it fascinates me and it troubles me just how often people in my network and just in general miss these opportunities.
Well, and I will say this, as a natural extrovert, it is a little bit easier for me. I always joke that when I was a kid, I would always get in trouble to talk to strangers, and then I've built an entire profession on it.
Yes.
But it is funny because, and it's very interesting. And any team I've ever worked with, I talk about this all the time, because if you are not naturally an extrovert, there are still ways to build up skills. So when you walk into a room of networking, when you walk into a room of business associates or even decision makers, you have enough skill set and confidence that you can show up in a really wonderful way without having to turn on some inauthentic extroverted version of you. There's a way to do it. And I've worked with a lot of different development folks on this, of how do you show up and have your branding, have, those one-liners, have an elevator pitch that doesn't feel like a sales pitch, but feels like a connection. And it's interesting because there's so many organizations that they need to be doing community engagement work, and maybe they are, and they haven't fully leaned into the realization of the true impacts and strides that can be made by reaching out and doing those connections to say, this is who I am and this is what I do. What do you do? How can we support each other? There's a tentative missed opportunity or growth opportunity there.
Yeah. Yeah. And these questions need to be asked, and it surprises me how shy people are about asking them.
Well, and I think it's the fear of getting told no, or even the fear of people, turning away from you. And in the wonderful work I've done as a human to be better for myself, it's this realization of, even if you ask someone for something and they say no, it doesn't mean that I am worth less, right? And I feel like whether you're in sales, and sales is such a broad scope, right? If you're asking for a donation for a nonprofit, you're technically in sales. If you're in banking and you're trying to build a, commercial book of business, you're still in sales. Sales is such a broad stroke. And when you realize that the right people are going to show up for you, it changes the whole mindset of the ask. You no longer feel intimidated by the ask, because if someone says no, that's okay. Someone is going to say yes. And it could be, you could be recruiting board members and, okay, well, I'm asking these new board members to be in. If they say no, that's okay. You might find the perfect board member. And I think about this with attrition within business as well. If you lose team members, and I've done this, I've lost team members to where I've had to completely rebuild a team. And I'm sort of going, well, where I thought we were going to be this time next year isn't going to be. But there's beauty in the rebuild. There's beauty in going, okay, so I heard no. So how can I grow from the opportunity? Either that is let me rework the framework of the ask. Let me better understand what's the void I'm trying to fill here. If it's rebuilding a team or even, rebuilding a network, what am I just sort of trying to put people in seats? And there's a whole ideology about put the right people in the right seats on the right bus. The same thing is with your network or building a team or building partnerships between your organization and another organization, or your business and another business. If it's not naturally a right fit and maybe someone says no, that just opens the door to the possibility of yes. And maybe that's my abundance mindset speaking versus my scarcity. But once you shift that mindset, it feels much more authentic and natural when you do get a yes versus trying to force people who said no, or people being like, I don't know. Great. That's okay if you don't know. I'm still here. If you ever want to partner in the future, we're here. But it's those yeses that we're looking for that are better alignment for where we're trying to go.
And it's always fortunate when we get those yeses too.
Yes. And then the expansion of what the yeses might be.
Yes. I think I've said yes more times in the
See?
past few seconds than I have in a while. But that's all right. That's
It's
all
naturally
right.
happening.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about leadership. What do you think organizations and teams ought to be doing in terms of building leadership these days?
Leadership, it's very interesting because I think that a lot of organizations recognize strong and efficient doers and say, you are the best at what you do. You're the best in your focus area. we're going to elevate you to leadership. But that doesn't mean that person is trained to be a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I have watched this happen, especially in like a clinical space. Oh, you're the best nurse on the floor. You're the best doctor in the practice. You're the best. That's wonderful. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are suited for leadership. And I've watched really good leadership and I've watched not so good leadership along my career. And I think one of the biggest lessons, and we talked about this briefly earlier, humanity is critical in leadership. People can fight me to the nth degree about that, and that's okay. When you show up as a leader, if you choose to not care about the humans that you're leading, the tentative longevity of not only building relationships with those people, but the longevity of those folks wanting to work harder for you and for your company, you miss a critical opportunity there. And it's funny because I've actually been challenged in my leadership by superiors to say, you're caring too much about what's happening in their lives or whatnot. It's a fine balance. You don't want to get caught up in the ongoings of an employee's life, but to check in and say, hey, I know that you had an emergency thing where you took your dog to the vet. Is everything going okay? Hey, I know that your son had pink eye. I just want to check in. I'm glad we were able to flex your time. Was everything okay? Did he get his prescription? It is not outside, and this is where people challenge me. It is not outside of our scope of work because we collectively as a team need to work together to advance some mission. So if I don't care about you, why are you going to care about me? I want you to care about me because I want to work hard for you and I want you to work hard for me. And so if we are not showing up in a way of care, now it doesn't mean get swirled in the drama. It's a fine balance, but you have to care. And I think when employees recognize that the leaders at the top of the organization don't care about them, why would I care to show up? Why would I care to work hard? Why would I care to do extra when I'm asked? Oh, you want me to pick up some extra shifts on the weekend? You don't care about me. Why would I care about you? And it feels like a very topical, timely conversation. Because look at the shift we've had in workforce development. A lot of companies, a lot of employers are saying, I can't get good employees. And when I get good employees, I struggle to get them to stay. If we pause and we really focus on how do we show up better for our team, for our employees, they are naturally going to work better for us. Now, and I have a wonderful friend. She's a leader at Owens, Illinois. She has said, it's not how do I show up and treat them in a way that I want to be treated? How do I show up and treat them in a way that they want to be treated? How do I show up to lead them how they want to be treated? And I have had very honest conversations and one-on-ones with team members to say, this is how I naturally show up. How do I like to communicate via text and via email. What do you prefer? I would actually prefer one meeting every week for 1 hour that we hash out everything. If it's a touch base really quick via email, I really like that, but I do not want to see text on my phone. Great. Now I know as a leader that texts are actually going to drain you. I don't want to drain you. I want to be part of the solution and a part of your success. And so I think it's sort of similar, honestly, when you break it down to relationships, like even with, a friend or with a partner, what's your love language? Oh, you like words of affirmation. Okay, that's good to know because my expression of love is actually gifts and quality time. But if your receiving of love is words of affirmation, then I'm going to make sure I show up and go, honey, you look beautiful today. I really appreciate you unloading the dishwasher for me. Gosh, that took such strain off me that you filled the gas tank with gas when you borrowed my car. Thank you so much. It's different, but it's the exact same because when we work with our teams, how do you receive praise? That's the same thing. Do you want a thank you note and a $15 gift card to Amazon? Or do you want a genuine face-to-face, I really appreciate you stepping up and taking care of that when I was at that meeting. It means so much to know that I can trust my team. I don't think you understand the weight that you picked up off my shoulders by just utilizing your critical thinking skills and taking that off my plate. Thank you so much. And it feels so simple and it's so difficult. It's so difficult. But when we look at relationships on the full broad scope, that's what leadership is. How do you effectively show up in a relationship? It could be someone reporting to you. It could be a friend in your life. It could be, an actual partner. It's all the same thing. And I think a lot of it is getting the effective communication and the expectations out ahead of time.
Hmm.
Because if there are quiet expectations, someone is going to be disappointed. And again, that's personal or professional. If we can sit down and have an honest human conversation to say, how do you want to be led? What do you want to see from me as your leader? And then it gives employees a moment, or partners, or, even if I've worked with leaders to say, I'm following your lead. Just as a heads up, this is how I like to be led. Sometimes I will lead that conversation, but if we can just take a pause, be humans at a table, say, I see you as a human. How can I show up the best for you? That honestly, I have found to be the best way for leadership to be an effective tool.
I have too, and I appreciate your telling us some of those stories and the background, because I always believed that people bring their whole selves into work. Now, we don't have to talk about their whole selves while
Right.
we're at work.
But it's the, and I've actually done this to where I it's the balance of the culture of my department versus the culture of an organization, right? So if a
Hmm.
culture of an organization is you must be at your desk 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, period. And if I go to talk with my team member and I see that they're just sitting there staring at their computer, and I go, "Hey, are you okay?" "Well, my boyfriend and I, we ended up having a fight last night and I'm feeling some type of way, or I woke up and my dog was sick and I dropped him off, but let's take a few minutes. Let's talk about it." And
Yeah.
or, "Hey, how about you take the next few hours, you go take care of what you need to take care of, because I want to make sure that when you're here that you're not anxiously worrying about other aspects to your life." Because I've been there, and we all need grace. We all need pause. And so if you have the ability to offer your team support in that way, to say, I see that you're actually going through a hard time. And while I cannot be your therapist right now, I can be your support, right? Because it's a fine balance. I can be your support. And I feel like the best next thing would be, do you want to take a little bit of time to reconnect with yourself so that when you show up tomorrow, you're ready to go, you're ready to achieve the things we need to achieve? And you don't want to be taken advantage of as a leader. And also, I don't want a team to just be, sitting here feeling worthless at work, and or distracted, and or anxious, and or, overridden in their nervous system. So how can I show up in an empathetic, caring way while still recognizing the goal is to achieve the work. The goal is still to achieve the work and to achieve a mission together. But the journey that we're going to get there might look different, because we as leaders might need to be more empathetic to the life that people bring to work with them.
And I agree that, empathy goes a long way, not only in forging relationships, but in building team performance. And I've been in organizations where empathy was, not permitted. Let's
You
put it
know,
that way.
it was condoned.
Hmm.
Being told, and I'm a very emotionally empathetic, emotionally intelligent person, which is actually funny. The very first boss I ever had, he came up to me after it was a pretty heated business meeting. And he was like, I want to give you kudos for your emotional intelligence. And I was like, my what? He's like, you read that room and were able to bring everyone down to get them on the same page. I was like, I didn't even know I did that. And so recognizing that your emotions can actually be a superpower. It's just
Hmm.
how you want to utilize them. But it is funny because it is against an old school thinking of, you are here to work, don't bring your emotions to work with you. I don't want to hear them, I don't want to see them. And it's like, that's not reality, unfortunately, especially in today's day and age. They feel more comfortable to wear their emotions on their sleeves, which I think is a good thing. But then how do we as leaders lean into that, which means that sometimes we have to be better. We have to be better as emotional beings for ourselves to then show up better for others. And actually, Bill, the funny thing I have learned is it then works better when we have to have constructive conversation about growth opportunity, to say,
Hmm.
hey, you executed this, and here are the marks that you really hit it on. Here's an opportunity actually for us to grow through this, because it feels less like a reprimanding and more like a conversation, less like a performance improvement plan, and more like I still was able to achieve X, Y, and Z. And now my leader is actually noting for me that I have growth, that there's an opportunity here for growth versus being like, you didn't actually achieve what I was looking for, so be better. It's like there's a better way to have the conversation to keep people engaged and invested in growing something together.
And, something that you just said, Julia, prompted a thought. We go back to emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
which is so essential yet so underrated, and that's something that I focus on in my work, because I always need to improve in this area. It's a continuous improvement piece for me. And we've been mentioning during our conversation that things are a little weird right now in the
Right.
workplace. They've been weird for the last few years, and
Mhm.
I don't know how we snap ourselves out of them if this is the new normal.
Right. Well, and I think like anything, as we evolve and we change, we recognize that the evolution isn't scary. It shouldn't be scary. It's just different, right? And I think we're in a very unique moment in time that we have, was it 3, maybe 4 generations in the workforce right now? And that is different because if you think about the baby boomers, they didn't have cell phones or internet until, I mean, I didn't even have internet till almost high school. And so when we think about how we're showing up and the tools that we've had from our infancy until our professional world, even that puts the generations, the leadership and the doers and the innovators all sort of at different stages that, and this sort of connects back to what we said earlier about our missions are more similar than they are different. If we show up as humans first and we try to get to know each other as humans, to go, you've had a cell phone since you were, a kid. I didn't have a cell phone since I was, until I was 50. Those are two very different things.
Mm.
Kids who had iPads as kids versus, someone who did their master's on a typewriter. Those two people are in the workforce right now. And
Yeah.
so how do we find the humanity to go, we are humans first? And so just because our experiences are different, I do not think that that is a bad thing. It means that we can give different perspective to the work that we're collectively trying to achieve together. And I think there's also there needs to be a new wave of the current veteran workforce to recognize that there are more efficient ways to do this. And this is something I'm even struggling with. I'm curious to see what you're going to say about this. The utilization of efficiencies like AI to make the work easier, not to replace anything, but to make it easier. And there are folks that are leaning in heavily and they're going, heck yeah, let's make efficiencies. And there are other people who are gripping on for dear life going, something new. No, this is how we've always done it. We can't have that. And so
Hmm.
when we think about the change in workforce, how younger folks are becoming the senior leadership and how that is, it's causing some chaos, and then trying to get new employees, new folks entering the workforce into a position that, old established folks, veteran folks can recognize, oh, the younger workforce cares about their life, not just about work. They care about taking trips and going to concerts and having experiences of life, and not the veteran folks who maybe have 300 hours of banked vacation time. Those are two different, sets of folks. And so understanding each other's differences to find the compassion and the humanity in our similarities. It's a lot of just anthropology. It's the study of humans. It's the study of human nature and trying to understand each other and see eye to eye to then move ahead together. It's
Hmm.
fascinating. I unintentionally and or intentionally have made this a passion of mine to understand how do we show up better to be better together. But it's a massive tactic of leadership to be successful as a leader, to show up better for your people. But it really is just understanding human nature and leaning into the emotion and the empathy. Emotion, people have almost weaponized emotion as though it's a bad thing.
Mm.
And it really, truly, it is because you can use emotion, especially if you're hyper emotionally intelligent, to tentatively manipulate the room, which we don't want, but you can use it to actually bring down the temperature to get folks on the same page. And it is when you are able to recognize that you have the power of emotion to lean into it, to build a business, to build a department, to be an effective leader, to be an effective CEO, even heck, to be a doer. Coming up in my career, being able to be someone who is the one producing the deliverables and recognizing, okay, so this leader is anxious about this. They haven't verbalized it, but I can feel it. Okay, that leader wants this leader to get to here, you're able to read the room in a different way that actually makes you more effective in your job. I one time had a boss say to me, "It feels like you know what I want before I even tell you." And it's like,
Mm.
that's because I'm leaning into my emotion. I'm recognizing and I'm utilizing critical thinking. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going against like, oh, I don't need your consent to do this project. I'm going to do it anyway. No, I'm trying to make your job easier because I can sense that that's where we're going to go. So I can draft it up and say, hey, it feels like we were about to go here. Is that correct? Do you want me? Oh my gosh, how did you know that? That's exactly what I was thinking. Beautiful. That means that my emotional intelligence and my connection to myself and leaning into just trusting myself actually is making me a more effective doer, which then in turn allowed me to become a leader. It's all very interesting when we think about the humanity of it all.
It is. It is. Do you have any closing thoughts for us?
I'm always grateful to talk about development of business, and especially when we think about where business is going, where leaders are going, and the lean into alignment and authenticity. Also, obviously, that's a passion point for me. That's a focus area for me. And I think when we trust ourselves, we have a better opportunity to show up for ourselves and for others. And so as we continue to be better, business producers, we can be stronger humans in the process. So I'm just grateful to have had the conversation and excited to see what's next for the future of leadership.
I am too. And Julia Hage, it was fantastic having you on the show today. Viewers and listeners out there, if you've got comments, please leave them in the appropriate places, or send me a message. Julia, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah. Any of my socials, so the Hage Co, TheHageCo, or just look up Julia Hage. Everything is connected. The other place to go would be thehageco.com, as we have all the wonderful things about keynotes and different feature conversations that would be helpful for business advancement or even personal advancement, depending on what you're looking for. So there's a TED Talk out there that I had the pleasure of being hosted down at BGSU to do a TED Talk back in March. So if you'd like to learn more about what it looks like to become a walkaway warrior and thoughtfully remove yourself from times and spaces that no longer align, feel free to check that out. But the website and the socials, check me out, Julia Hage, the Hage Co. That's going to be the best way.
Excellent. Please check her out, folks. And I hope to see you on another step on the perfect route.